It was the 7th year of our marriage when my husband gave me 999 roses. As soon as I came out of surgery, I dialed the phone and, in a flat tone, asked him for a divorce. On the other end of the line, his young girlfriend apologized through tears. "Ma'am, it's all my fault. Please don't be angry with Mr. Bye." Joshua gently comforted her for a while before coldly telling me, "As you wish." When I saw him again, it was already 2 weeks later. Chapter 1. Make me a bowl of noodles. Joshua came home early in the morning, but unlike usual, he didn't find a warm meal on the dining table. He instinctively frowned, gave me a couple of orders, and then headed for the bathroom. When he came out, steam rising from his body, I was still half-heartedly watching TV. He pulled several luxury brand bags from his suitcase. "Look, do you like them?" The pink bag seemed to be the favorite style of young girls. In the past, when he tried to win me over, he would follow my preferences. Now, he just relied on boring gifts to appease me. I couldn't be bothered to look anymore. I picked up the remote, changed the channel, and asked him, "When will you have time to get a divorce?" Joshua was busy. Even our anniversary gift was picked by his female secretary. When it came to his work, I had to adjust to his schedule. "Stop it. Fiona doesn't know you hate roses. I'll remind her next time." The man poured himself a small glass of red wine and sat across from me on the single sofa, wearing a faint smile. Fiona was Joshua's childhood friend, and she had liked him since they were young. As soon as she graduated, she quickly became his personal secretary. They were so close that even on business trips, they shared a suite. Actually, I didn't blame Fiona for pursuing Joshua. After all, it takes two to tango. If he hadn't wanted it, no woman could have made it to his bed. I exaggerated a yawn, and tears unconsciously welled up in my eyes. Not hearing my response for a long time, Joshua assumed that the matter had ended. He asked about the ranking of our 7-year-old son's latest exam. I shook my head. "I don't know." I wasn't deliberately withholding the information because I was angry at Joshua. I really didn't know. The Bai family emphasized elite education. Their children had been raised in the ancestral home since they were little, always enrolled in various courses. It was almost laughable. This child was clearly mine, yet I rarely got to see him. I cried and threw tantrums, but the Bai family remained indifferent. To them, me marrying into the Bai family was already a stroke of good fortune for my family. As for anything else, it was simply out of the question. Joshua pinched the bridge of his nose, urging me to focus more on the child. "At this rate, Fiona will be more like his mother than you." I understood. Yesterday, Friday, was the only day I was allowed to pick up my son from school. I arrived an hour early and waited until it was dark. With the school gates closing, it was then that Fiona called, saying that Madam had asked her to pick up the child for dinner. On the other end of the line, I heard Joshua's voice. He asked Fiona if she wanted some soup. It hit me. I forced a smile and said to Joshua, "Isn't this what you wanted? I'll leave right now and give her some space." I wasn't sure which word hurt Joshua, but he fell silent for a few seconds before suddenly erupting in anger. "My patience is limited. Elena, stop this." The man stood up and walked a few steps. I calmly said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I had a miscarriage." Chapter 2. A month ago, that night, he received a call from Fiona, rushed out of the house to help her with a drinking situation. I was in so much pain that I nearly passed out, so I drove myself to the hospital for emergency treatment. The doctor told me I had been pregnant for over 2 months, but the baby had no heartbeat. It had already been absorbed. When I found out the child was dead, I actually felt a sense of relief. Lying alone in the hospital bed, I thought it was time to end this marriage. In the living room, Joshua had his back to me, gripping his wine glass tightly, his knuckles turning white. He didn't ask me why I didn't reach out to him. He knew full well how many times I had tried to call him that night. Unfortunately, no one had answered. "It's fine if there's nothing. The truth is, you can't be a mother," he said. Joshua walked into the study and skillfully closed the door behind him. 7 years of marriage, countless arguments. I was always the first to back down. But this time, Joshua never heard the familiar sound of me knocking on the door, begging for peace. Half an hour later, He opened the door and searched the large house but couldn't find me. I was Joshua's first love. No one would have expected that a well-mannered, handsome young heir would fall in love with a girl who smoked, partied, and had no interest in studying. Our first meeting wasn't pleasant. In a stinky alley, a good student was being threatened by street thugs. I happened to pass by, and someone whistled at me, so I rode my bike straight into the crowd, teaching the thugs a lesson while inadvertently solving a crisis for the shy young man. From then on, Joshua wouldn't leave me alone. He followed me home after school. No matter how much I tried to shake him off, he gave me roses, which I coldly threw into the toilet to soak before tossing them back onto his desk. He made me an expensive lunch, which I gave to a beggar on the street. My friends teased me, saying I had a rich, passionate simp in my life. Anyone could see that we came from completely different worlds. But it was this man who, when my drunken father beat me so badly I couldn't go to school, broke into the house, picked me up, and rushed me to the hospital. When the doctor stitched me up, he stood with his back to me, his shoulders trembling uncontrollably, constantly wiping his face with his hands. The doctor, helpless and amused, asked him why he was crying when he wasn't the one injured. Joshua said he didn't know why, but his chest hurt terribly. He even stupidly asked the doctor if he needed an ECG. In the hospital room, Joshua awkwardly peeled an apple. I don't want to feel this way anymore. Elena, please, stop getting hurt. I ate the ice cream cone he bought me, muttered in agreement, and then glared at him. Then will you be my boyfriend? We spent the whole day blushing and unable to speak. I told Joshua a secret. Whenever my dad got drunk and beat my mom to the point of near death, the next day there would always be a wilted rose at home as an apology. So, if one day he wanted to break up with me, he didn't need to say anything. Just give me a rose. Fool, we'll always be together, Joshua said, hugging me tightly at 18, not allowing me to say anything foolish. Chapter 3. To escape my father's unreasonable behavior, Joshua took me abroad to study. To force us to break up, his father cut off all financial support. At that time, we worked 2 part-time jobs every day in addition to going to school. Though those days were incredibly hard and busy, Joshua and I still couldn't help teasing each other even while brushing our teeth. In our small apartment, we laughed and bickered, completely absorbed in each other. How wonderful it would have been if we could live like that forever. Miss Lynn, are you okay? The doctor's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Today was the 3rd day since I moved out of the villa, and my insomnia had worsened. I held the prescription the doctor gave me and ran into Fiona while picking up my medication. Ma'am, why are you here alone? Fiona innocently blinked, and when I didn't respond, she looked at me with pity. I heard from Joshua about your child. Don't be sad. You're still so young. You'll have another one soon. Don't worry. There won't be another. As soon as I finished speaking, I saw Joshua approaching with a dark look on his face. I noticed he was holding a spray can tightly in his hand and didn't understand why he was so angry. Fiona coquettishly told me that she had twisted her ankle while coming downstairs and that it was only a slight injury that didn't need medical attention. But Joshua insisted she come to the hospital, which made her late for work. When he saw the medication bag in my hand, Joshua couldn't help asking, "Are you feeling unwell?" Seeing that I was ignoring him and was about to leave, he grabbed my medication. When did you start having insomnia? Elena, I'm talking to you. How long are you going to keep this up? Joshua thought I had left in a fit of anger, as an attempt to get his attention. So, until now, he had never asked where I was staying or what I had been doing these past few days. Unconsciously, he raised his voice, causing people around us to stop and look at him. A flash of annoyance passed through my eyes. After snatching my medication back, I softly said, "I'm not causing trouble." Perhaps my tone was too calm, and Joshua mistook it for weakness. He suggested he drive me home first, then take Fiona back to her office. But I shook my head. Work is more important. I can walk by myself. When I said home, I meant my own home. Chapter 4. My alcoholic father died in a car accident, leaving me a large compensation payout. The house that I once longed to escape from had now become my only refuge. As I walked away, I caught a glimpse of Joshua. who was about to take a step forward but was stopped when Fiona grabbed his arm. With a pale face, she told him that she was feeling unwell. It seemed like a hypoglycemic episode. Joshua hesitated for a moment before not following me. Instead, he turned and walked toward a nearby vending machine. The day my lawyer drafted the divorce agreement, I happened to receive a call from Joshua. He urgently told me, "Our son is sick. Come to the old house before 5 o'clock. Before I could ask any questions, he hung up. I printed the agreement and felt an overwhelming sense of relief. When I arrived at the Bai family's old house, I found everyone was there. They were having a family dinner, and my son was sitting right between Joshua and Fiona, two outsiders. They looked like a real family of three, with red eyes. I walked up to my son, whom I hadn't seen in a while, and gently touched his face, asking him what was wrong. The boy looked almost like a miniature version of Joshua. He swatted my hand away in disgust, glaring at me, his eyes pleading for help from Fiona. A sharp pain shot through my heart. Fiona lovingly pulled my son into her arms and, with an innocent tone, said, "Mario isn't sick. Elena, have you taken too many sleeping pills? Are you confusing your memories?" As soon as Fiona finished speaking, the Bai family members looked at me with disdain. I knew they were mocking me deep down, especially Joshua's sister, Amanda. She had always thought I wasn't worthy of her brother. She had made things difficult for me before, but for Joshua's sake, I chose to endure it. But this time, I didn't want to endure any longer. I turned to Joshua and asked, "You told me on the phone that Mario was sick and to come over. I crossed half the city to get here, and now your mistress says I'm confused. Who is lying? Who is really sick here?" To my surprise, my tone was so forceful that Fiona's face changed to one of panic. She opened her mouth, as if to explain something, but I didn't give her the chance. I lowered my eyes and warned her, "Fiona, if you want to be a mistress, that's your business, but don't use my son to compete for attention. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." The sharpness of my words made Fiona's eyes redden with frustration. Joshua threw his chopsticks down, staring at me with a cold expression. "Elena, you're just jealous. Our son has had a cold for days. Have you, as his mother, even cared for him? And you were supposed to be here by 5 o'clock, but you made everyone wait. Since you have no sense of time, go eat with the servants in the side room." In this house, no one dared to defy him. Chapter 5. A flash of dark triumph crossed Fiona's eyes as she bit her lip. Looking at me with a sympathetic expression, Amanda raised an eyebrow, her eyes full of outright disdain. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, I walked toward the housekeeper. Susanna, if you have time, come over to my house. I'll cook something for you." After saying this, I exchanged a look with Joshua and gave him a contemptuous smile. "You really disgust me." As I made to leave, Joshua quickly stood up and grabbed my hand, his anger barely hidden in his furrowed brow. "Where do you think you're going? Did I tell you to leave?" His shamelessness infuriated me. "It's none of your business. Let go of me." After receiving Fiona's glare, Amanda immediately sneered at me. "Elena, after all these years, you're still the same. You're just a wild chicken who can never become a phoenix." To my surprise, Joshua turned and scolded Amanda. "Shut up!" Taking advantage of his distraction, I broke free from his grip. The sharp pain on my wrist ignited the long-suppressed anger within me. I coldly scanned the room, my gaze landing on Amanda's self-important, disgusting face. "I'm going to show you what real bad manners look like." I slowly walked to Amanda's side, picked up the bowl of her favorite rich soup, and poured it over her head. It wasn't an entirely unexpected move, but it was something no one had predicted. In the Bai household, the typically submissive young wife had done something so bold. For a few seconds, the old house fell unnervingly silent. Then, Amanda finally reacted, letting out a shrill scream. The rest of the people seemed to wake up from a dream and began to rally around Amanda, complaining about what had just happened. What had started as a lavish family dinner quickly turned into a noisy, chaotic scene, but I couldn't have been happier inside. This was the true flavor of life. It was noisy, it was lively, but when all that noise is coming from you, there's a certain powerlessness. After all, I only have one mouth, and with my volume, I can never drown out theirs. The only thing I could do was find the angriest person in the room. Just as Amanda was about to raise her hand to slap me, I grabbed her hair in a flash and shoved a whole loaf of bread into her obnoxious mouth. Finally, Amanda was quiet. I smiled at Joshua and said, "That's how you shut someone up." Seeing the family members looking at me with dark expressions, especially the old lady, who was pounding the table in fury and shaking as she cursed at me. It was clear they still didn't understand what bad manners truly meant. With a sigh, I walked over to the corner of the table, grabbed the white tablecloth, and yanked it off. The sound of plates crashing to the floor was sharp and clear, food splattering everywhere. The well-dressed family members were all stained with the flying food. No one is ever unafraid of a madwoman. Maybe it was because my actions were so crazy, yet my eyes were so cold and clear. For a moment, no one dared speak, nor did anyone dare approach me. My gaze met Joshua's, and I spread my arms out with a relaxed expression on my face. From the moment I married into your family, I wanted to do this. 7 years had passed, and I think I really could have endured. But now, there was nothing to fear anymore. The old lady clutched her chest, her voice trembling as she demanded that Joshua divorce me immediately. Before I could thank her for her help, Joshua told everyone that I had been mentally unstable lately and that they shouldn't take me seriously. "Elena, clean up this mess. This is your last chance." At this, Fiona and the family all looked at him in disbelief. Even I couldn't help but wonder if I should check his temperature. Was he sick? Crazy. After calling Joshua insane, I took the divorce agreement out of my bag. I threw it at him in front of everyone. "Mario, I'll visit you again when I have time." With that, I walked out of the family's gates without looking back. The car engine roared as I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Joshua chasing after me, with Fiona right behind him. His hands were stained with blood, but he didn't seem to notice as he wildly pounded on the car window. "Elena!" he yelled, wanting to talk to me. Fiona, with a sob in her voice, urged, "Joshua, take care of your wound first." He ignored her, his eyes only on me. "Elena, get out of the car!" I gave him a cold smile, stepped on the accelerator, and drove away without a second glance. Chapter 6. That night, my phone rang incessantly, like waves crashing one after another. Even with it on silent mode, the screen still flickered repeatedly, until I could no longer tolerate it and pulled out the SIM card. Unable to reach me by phone, Joshua turned to bombard me with messages on WeChat. He questioned my decision to divorce, asking if it was just because of those 999 roses. He apologized, not understanding why I couldn't let go. He mentioned our 7 years together, urging me not to lose so much over something so small. When he spoke of our son, his tone became even more sincere, pleading with me not to tear our family apart. After thinking it over, I replied with a single sentence, "You need to calm down." This was a phrase he often used to soothe my anger, and I knew the power it held. Sure enough, he fell silent instantly, and I heard no more from him. The following week, it was as though he had disappeared entirely, with no further contact. I noticed that he had been quietly driving around the old neighborhood where I lived. At that moment, I was standing on the roof, watering the plants, when my eyes casually caught sight of his familiar license plate. I stretched lazily, then turned and went back inside without a second thought. Though the divorce had not yet been formally processed, my new life had already begun. I found temporary work at a convenience store near the park, and I slowly resumed interacting with the outside world. As a stay-at-home wife for so long, I had almost forgotten how to talk to people comfortably. Fortunately, most of the customers were patient and understanding. Among them was a young college student who came to the park daily to walk his golden retriever. He often asked me to look after the dog tied outside the store. Over time, we became familiar, and I learned that he was actually a neighbor from my building. Sometimes, we would run into each other downstairs, and he would invite me to walk the dog together. We would chat while strolling, enjoying that rare sense of leisure. Occasionally, he would bring food he had made himself to share with me, and our bond grew stronger. We became indispensable friends in each other's lives. One weekend evening, I finally received a WeChat message from Joshua, asking me to come to the office to handle the divorce agreement. In the past, he didn't like me to show up at his workplace, perhaps because he worried that my simple appearance would embarrass him in front of his colleagues. When I received the message, I had just finished my shift at the convenience store. I quickly tidied myself up and went to his office. When I arrived, he was busy on a call. He glanced at me briefly and motioned for me to sit and wait. I noticed that Fiona was not there, so I decided to skip the coffee and immerse myself in a mobile game instead. When I finished a round, I realized that at some point, Joshua had stood behind me, quietly watching. "Sign here." He pulled his gaze away and placed the divorce agreement on the coffee table. I didn't sign immediately as he had hoped, instead carefully reading through each clause of the agreement. His generosity surprised me, but I wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. I proposed that the overseas property we bought 2 years ago be transferred to me, in exchange for which I would give up my original shares in the company. Joshua hesitated for a moment before contacting his lawyer to revise the agreement. However, just as I was about to sign, he suddenly blocked the signature section with his hand. His face darkened as he reminded me, "Read carefully. The custody of the child will be mine. Once you sign, you'll have no contact with him." I certainly understood that. I also knew that although the law granted me visitation rights, if the Bai family opposed it, it would be nearly impossible for me to see my son again. The sadness in my heart was indescribable, but my determination to divorce remained unshakable. Chapter 7. The child would undoubtedly have a life of material wealth with Joshua, I casually remarked. "You've given him a prosperous environment to grow up in. That's already putting him at a high starting point in life." Joshua clearly didn't expect me to respond this way. He scoffed, impatiently waving me off. "I have things to do. Let's end this here." With that, he tore up the divorce agreement in front of me. I paused for a moment, then smirked sarcastically. "It's fine. I'll take the legal route for the divorce, because I've really had enough of you." "Stop. Stop right there." Joshua's voice was filled with unprecedented panic. He followed me closely, ignoring the curious glances of his subordinates, all the way to the elevator. Suddenly, he questioned me, "Do you already have another man? You wore lipstick because you were going to meet him, didn't you?" I remained silent. He pressed further. "If not, how could you be so heartless as to not even want your own son?" Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Fiona stepped out. She should have been enjoying her time off, but had unexpectedly appeared due to a tip from one of her female colleagues. As someone from a respectable family, she softly advised Joshua to let me leave, trying to save face. However, Joshua angrily brushed her off and coldly retorted, "This is a matter between my wife and me. You have no right to interfere." Fiona's face instantly turned pale, and she glanced around. She noticed the colleagues who had already suspected something about her relationship with Joshua now whispering amongst themselves. She couldn't imagine how much gossip this incident would stir up in the office. Tears welled up in Fiona's eyes as she fled to the stairs. I looked at Joshua and gave a cold smile. "Aren't you going to chase after her?" In reality, I had never really held much resentment toward Fiona. The true betrayer of my relationship with Joshua had always been Joshua himself. I reconnected with some old friends from the past. Helen, Lisa, and we were like the domestic version of the Cat's Eye sisters. We had once avoided our original families during our youth and walked together through the darkest times. They always knew my address and had my contact details. But as we grew older, we seemed to tacitly follow some unwritten rule between adults and didn't disturb each other's lives. I poured my heart out to them, telling them about Joshua's despicable behavior. As the alcohol took effect, they became so enraged that they almost wanted to help me burn down the Bai family's old house. We laughed through our tears, holding our heads in our hands, as if trying to release all the grievances we had buried for so long. As time passed, my insomnia symptoms gradually eased. However, the peace didn't last long. Less than a month later, Joshua barged back into my life. He appeared unexpectedly at my doorstep, staying from 3 p.m. until 1 a.m. His actions became so unbearable that the neighbors almost called the police. Reluctantly, I let him in. Since I left, Joshua had noticeably lost weight. The once confident and composed light in his eyes had dimmed. Susanna told me that after I moved out, Joshua often returned to the old house. At first, Bai's old lady was overjoyed, preparing lavish meals for her son and grandson daily. She even invited Fiona to stay, hoping to rekindle things between them. But things didn't go as she had hoped. Joshua became increasingly picky about food, eating less and less. Worse still, his temper became increasingly erratic, and he would often erupt in rage over trivial matters. There was one time when he spent an entire day in the storage room searching for a certain item from his high school years. He ended up taking his anger out on the maid when he couldn't find it. A few days ago, he had even kicked Fiona out of his bedroom in front of everyone. The two had a huge argument, and Fiona, losing control of her emotions, fell down the stairs, suffering a crushed ankle. Bai's old lady, enraged by Joshua blaming her for ruining his marriage, had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital that same night. Along with Fiona, they were still recovering in the hospital. As for Joshua, seeing him in such a haggard and lifeless state, I guessed he hadn't had a good night's sleep in quite a while. It reminded me of how I felt when I lost my child, that same pain. Chapter 8. Joshua apologized to me, admitting that he had finally understood why I wanted a divorce. He mentioned the silent compromises I had made throughout our 7 years of marriage. I realized you've completely lost faith in me. I gently shook my head. Disappointment, that was 2 years ago. My decision to divorce was made after careful thought. Disappointment is not the worst thing. What's truly terrifying is the deadened despair in your heart, and the complete release that follows. Looking into his eyes, I said calmly, Joshua, I'm already working towards a new life. You should gather your emotions and start your own journey too. He glanced around, then gave a bitter laugh. Do you remember how I came here and took you away? Even after all these years, I still dream of the way you were back then. He admitted that he had neglected me, but insisted that he had never betrayed me. I've only ever loved you, Elena, I countered. So, what do you think constitutes cheating? You were always by my side. Yet you could be easily called away by another woman's phone call. You enjoyed her affection but expected me to have hot meals ready for you at all times. That's not love. It's unfair to me. I stared at Joshua, my tone firm. Joshua's eyes flashed with a hint of regret, his eyes reddening slightly. I know. It was my fault, Elena. Give me another chance. I don't want to give up on the vows we made. He mentioned the promises we made in his father's mourning hall. You said you would always be with me, that we would live and die together. Have you forgotten that? Those promises. Who didn't speak them sincerely at the time? But hearts change, and he changed first. I could only change along with him. Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my young male neighbor standing outside. He saw Joshua inside and asked if I needed help. Suddenly, Joshua acted impulsively, throwing a punch at the neighbor. Clearly, he misunderstood the relationship between the neighbor and me. The two men immediately got into a scuffle. I tried to intervene but to no avail, so I coldly remarked, if you two want to fight, go ahead, but don't expect me to take responsibility for your injuries. With that, I slammed the door shut. As for the outcome of their fight, I didn't care. I only knew that after that day, Joshua never appeared in my life again. About 2 months later, after Bai's old lady was discharged and recovering, she unusually told me that my son missed me and asked if I could visit him. I hopped on my newly bought Harley, wearing a cool leather jacket. On that day, no single mother in front of the school gate could compare to me. Children are actually very easy to satisfy, as long as you give them something novel and cool to experience. So, I took my son to try the American fast food he had always wanted, but had been forbidden from by the Bai family. Chapter 9. After eating, my son excitedly asked if I could pick him up again next week. I smiled, fastening his safety helmet, and then took him back to the old house. I originally planned to leave, but Bai's old lady and Susanna stopped me. Their eyes were filled with complex emotions as they invited me in for tea. My son also grabbed my hand, asking if I could go upstairs and play with him for a while. Curious about the room I hadn't seen in a long time, I followed him upstairs. At the door of the study on the 3rd floor, I saw Joshua, who was attending a video conference from home. I froze in place until my son gently tugged at my sleeve. snapping me out of my daze. I followed him into the room, though my mind wasn't entirely present. I still tried to spend time with my son, playing with him as best I could. Looking at the time, I told him, "Mom needs to go home now. If I have time next week, I'll come to visit again." He blinked his bright eyes and asked earnestly, "Mom, can I go home with you? Can we bring Dad too?" I didn't know if Bai's family had coached him to say this, but I could clearly feel the longing in his voice. "If there's a chance, of course you can, but this time, it's just the two of us. No Dad." I didn't want to give him false hopes or disappointments. Leaving the room, Joshua was already waiting at the door. "Are you hungry?" Though I had just eaten, seeing the concern in his eyes, I decided not to refuse. "Just a little. Are you cooking?" "All right. I'll make something for you." We went to the kitchen dining area on the ground floor of the old house. It was completely empty. Joshua asked what I wanted to eat, and I casually replied, "Anything's fine." He took out a clean white ceramic pot and started washing rice to cook porridge. In fact, Joshua was much better at cooking than I was. I remembered when we were abroad, whenever I missed Chinese food, he would specifically go to the Chinese supermarket after work to pick up discounted ingredients. Porridge wasn't something we made often, but whenever I wasn't feeling well, he would always cook a bowl for me. I didn't disturb him as he focused on making the porridge. He didn't engage in idle chit-chat, just quietly tended to the pot. At that moment, it felt like we had returned to the past, and nothing had changed. However, this time, the porridge took longer to cook. Perhaps the heat was too high, or perhaps it was simply too long, but a burnt smell started to fill the kitchen. Joshua seemed not to notice, and when the porridge was ready, he took the pot off the stove and, without turning off the heat, brought it straight to me, filling my bowl with a large serving, though I clearly smelled the burnt scent. I didn't mention it and quietly began eating what might be the last bowl of porridge I ever tasted from him. "How does it taste?" Joshua eagerly asked. Watching me, I nodded slightly, but he seemed unconvinced. So, he picked up the soup spoon and quietly tasted a spoonful from my bowl. It's too bitter." He furrowed his brow, surprised. There were no seasonings, and the bottom of the pot was burnt. The porridge was nearly inedible. "How did this happen?" he muttered, his voice filled with confusion. I clearly added sugar. Looking at me, his eyes filled with regret, he said, "This porridge isn't good. Don't drink it. I'll make you a new one." He reached to take my bowl, but he forgot the porridge was still scalding hot. It instantly burned his hand, and he instinctively pulled back. The porridge splashed all over the table. I frowned at him. "Joshua, stop it. I'm really full." But he didn't seem to hear me. While speaking to me, he tried to clean up the mess. I watched as his hand grew red and swollen, the skin eventually blistering from the burns. I coldly spoke. "Stop pretending. I won't feel sorry for you." I wasn't lying. Looking at his hair, which had turned mostly white, I felt a strange sense of relief. This was all Joshua's own doing. He gazed at me in a daze, his eyes full of confusion. He couldn't understand how some people, once they decide not to love, can truly become so heartless. After I left, Joshua stayed in the kitchen all night, sitting there alone as if trying to find some answer. Not long after, he fell ill, and acute pneumonia left him gaunt, almost skeletal. After recovering and being discharged, he fell into insomnia, tossing and turning all night, eventually relying on medication to find brief moments of peace. Bai's old lady, for his sake, even humbled herself to ask me to visit him more often, but I paid no attention to her. Indifferent to her plea, Bai's family accused me of being cold-hearted, even asking my son not to meet with me, his so-called mother, but they had forgotten that children are not mindless dolls. They have their own judgment and emotions. In most cases, Joshua ignored the rare moments when I took my son and gave him the happiness he deserved. A month, 3 months, half a year passed. Time slowly passed, and Joshua finally recognized the reality that our relationship could never be revived. But even in the face of that truth, he chose to escape. He immersed himself in the spiritual world he had constructed for himself, while I stayed in my small apartment abroad, waiting for him. Every time he took his medicine and fell into a dream, we continued to live in the happy life we once shared. In the end, I went down the legal path and filed for divorce. My first attempt failed. The second time, after we had been separated for so long and our feelings had faded, the court granted our divorce. This judgment officially made me a free, independent single woman, financially self-sufficient. I didn't rush to buy a new place. Instead, I chose to completely renovate my old house, turning it into a more comfortable and livable space. During this time, a college student who owned a dog expressed interest in me, but after I politely declined, he showed maturity and respect and didn't bother me again. I hadn't lost hope in love. In fact, after becoming single again, I remained open to men of good character, but I no longer let love consume my entire life. What mattered more was my own happiness and inner fulfillment. I understood that only by taking good care of myself could I truly connect with others. At the airport in the bustling waiting hall, I was with two close friends, who were like sisters to me. We waved our selfie sticks, changing angles and poses, capturing hundreds of beautiful moments in one go. Though we jokingly criticized each other's photography skills, we all skillfully opened our photo editing apps and carefully selected each picture. Just as we were immersed in laughter, a charming gentleman happened to walk by. Catching our attention, we quickly stopped laughing and tried to maintain a composed demeanor. However, this moment of composure lasted only a minute. "Hey, do you think you're hungry? I think there's free instant noodles over there." One of my friends broke the brief silence. We three exchanged knowing glances, and without a word, we began playing rock paper scissors to decide who would go get the tempting noodles. As the game continued, we burst into laughter again, our joyful reflections appearing on the half-transparent glass. Looking up, I saw a plane slowly taking off against the backdrop of the blue sky, symbolizing freedom and dreams soaring into the horizon.